the executive chairman of Watergen, vice president of Euro-Asian Jewish Congress, that India is one of 27 countries that includes this Congress. We are in our group managing different kinds of businesses, from infrastructure to oil, gas, high-tech, manufacturing, and everything. I would like to tell you a couple of words because I'm coming from Israel, and I know that in India, one of the Indian biggest problems, this is a lack of the clean drinking water. In Israel in 1948, when the state was created, we didn't have the relevant condition for the people to live in this land because we didn't have water. Those days in Israel we have surplus of the water. We sell the water to the people. We don't have problem of water. Now the water is coming instead from the north to south. It's coming from the south to north because of the desalination plants and all the other deep irrigation technologies and everything. And I think it's not me, only all the Israeli companies that working in the water field feel that it's our obligation to share with our technologies with the entire world, and especially with Indian people, that for us, the relationship that we are created now in the recent years with the Honorable Prime Minister Modi are great between our two countries, and it's very important to help. Wars and conflicts between countries and within nations being due to the lack of drinking water. It is now one of the biggest challenges of our generation. In 2010, the United Nations General Assembly recognized the human right to the clean drinking water. 2 years ago, world leaders agreed to set 17 targets for ending poverty and hunger and bringing health, education, and social quality to everywhere, in every corner in the world by 2030. UN Sustainable Development Goal calls for universal and equitable access to safe and affordable drinking water, available to all, leaving no one behind. 1.7 million children under age 5 die every year because of the illness due to the shortage of the clean drinking water. 1.7 million children. 80% of the diseases coming from the poor sanitation. By 2025, half world population will be living with water-stressed areas. In India, has the highest number of the people without access of safe drinking water, around 75 million people. 140,000 children in India die from diseases each year from the using of dirty water. Indian aquifers provide 85% of the drinking water, with levels falling to 56% of the country. Today's session we will focus on how the entrepreneurs on this stage are using the innovative technologies to help sites and countries manage clean water scarcity. This important market, considered to have annual revenues of $700 billion, is working tirelessly to protect this limited resource for all humanity. I would like to introduce our panelists. First on our panel today is Mr. Parameshwaran Iyer, I am pronounced correct? Sorry. He's the Secretary and Minister of the Drinking Water and Sanitation and is spearheading the Swachh Bharat Mission, Clean India Mission, the government flagship and the National Rural Drinking Water Program. Mr. Iyer has spent significant time leading large government programs in India in his capacity as an officer of the Indian Administrative Services. In addition, he has also led several projects during his flying to World Bank in Washington, D.C. and work in Vietnam, China, Egypt, and Lebanon. I already noted some facts and figures on the global water crisis, so please, we will take a few minutes to share your expertise where India fits in this quotation.
Thank you very much. I think I'm probably the only non-entrepreneur on the stage, so let me give you a bit of the government or the Scarce perspective. No question, as Max said, we do have a overall water challenge in India, which the globe has it, but India has it as well. While 75% of the earth is covered with water, only 2.5% is actually potable, of which I think we use less than 1%. So, water everywhere is the theme of this session. Let's take India. As Max pointed out, India depends about 85% of our drinking water comes from groundwater, and our consumption of groundwater, you might call it mining of groundwater. We have got institutional challenges. We have many different ministries and departments looking at different aspects of water. So there is a challenge in terms of how we are seeking to address this in drinking water. I deal specifically with rural drinking water, which is a major challenge. We have just put this on a performance track. So we have now finally adopted a challenge mode where the federal government incentivizes state governments through fiscal transfers based on outcomes and performances. So we have introduced competition, we are focusing on sustainability, and finally you mentioned the Clean India program. It's called Swachh Bharat, which is about sanitation, and we have made major strides in this program. Our sanitation coverage, which is individual household toilets, low-cost toilets, twin pit toilets, was about 39% in 2004 when the program started. Today it's almost 73%. So there's been a big spurt, not just in construction of toilets, but in usage of toilets, because this program is focused on behavior change and not on construction. It makes it very challenging, but there's a mass movement going on in the country, particularly in rural areas, where people are now understanding the importance of sanitation from a health point of view as well. And so this program has a deadline of 2nd October 2019, which is the 150th birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi. So both water and sanitation are SDG 6.2, and we are confident that we will meet these goals well before the SDG deadline. Let me stop there, Max.
Thank you very much. Next on our panel is Mr. Vikas Shah, Chief Operating Officer of Water Health International. Welcome. Please take a few minutes to tell us about your company and what you are doing.
So, Water Health International is a community water systems company. So what we basically do is we purify water from an area and distribute it locally without necessarily using a centralized model where the water is pumped thousands of kilometers, purified and then distributed. The idea being that you try to risk manage the plant in such a fashion that you use the local water purified and supplied there for a number of reasons. The first being the social legitimacy. It's very difficult to legitimize extraction of water from one area and sell it somewhere else. So that allows its social legitimacy. The other thing is the cost of purification is low. And third is there is a buy-in from the community to ensure that this operation runs seamlessly. The model is build, operate, transfer, currently running about 500 plants in India, about 100 plants in Africa, growing at the rate of about 70 plants every quarter. And we purify about 1 billion liters a year, serving a little less than 5 million people. The grand vision is to go to 100 million people by 2020. And in my experience, by the way, I'm not from water. I just came to water 7-8 years ago. I'm a telecom man fundamentally. And that's one of the reasons why we continuously think out of the box. In fact, there's only one person from water industry in our company. Everybody else is from other industries. At least in my limited experience, what makes a water project successful or a failure is not the technology or the hardware. It's the operation and maintenance. And we pride ourselves into ensuring that any plant that breaks down in the world does not stay broken down for more than 4 hours. So the service level agreement is 4 hours, regardless of whether it's in Lagos, Abuja, Nairobi, wherever. So that's how it runs, and that's the model. By the way, the company is a US-based company, and largest equity ownership is with IFC and Coca-Cola Corporation.
Thank you very much. Welcome to Anat Shah, who is the Indian-American social entrepreneur and CEO of Sarvajal and Primal Foundation board member of Indicorps. So please take a few minutes to tell us about your company.
Sure. So the company that's relevant is a company called Sarvajal, and it started, I'll tell you kind of where we came from. The idea of water in the developed world is piped water out of a tap, and all of the water that comes out of the tap should be drinkable. This makes no sense whatsoever, because if you use 100 liters a day, you drink 5 of it, but you flush 40 liters a day down a toilet, that water doesn't have to be clean, right? But for whatever reason, the system has evolved such that we want safe water for the liters that we do drink out of a tap. For a country like India, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It doesn't even make sense in America to rebuild the water infrastructure for that. So our goal basically was to split drinking water from non-drinking water. No one in the world lives away from water of some kind, right? The reason cities were built around rivers, in villages, you have access to some kind of water. It may be bad water, it may not be good for you, it may not be drinkable. But the argument that you could build above ground infrastructure that delivered just the drinking water component to people seemed to be an entrepreneurial opportunity. Right? People pay for water, even though they may not pay for it in cash, in many different ways. They pay for it in time of what it takes to be able to fetch it. They pay for it in terms of healthcare cost. In the case of India, the vast majority of healthcare costs for rural Indians could be avoided if they had drinking water. And healthcare cost isn't just actual healthcare costs. If I go to a doctor from a village in Rajasthan, I want to go to the doctor in a good town. That costs me a day of work. I don't go alone. It costs somebody else a day of work. I don't want the free medicines because that's not what other people have. I want medicines that cost me money. That also costs me money. You can counter that with a solution which is preventative, which is clean water. So our solution, our business started on a self-imposed number. And the idea was that we wanted to get to a family of 5 to be able to give them drinking water in any given day for 5 rupees. That was where we went from. And we called it a Tata Nano kind of number. The idea was completely ridiculous. Figure out how to innovate so you can meet that number no matter what. And that forced us to do a whole bunch of things. The first was we reduced the cost of water machinery. We're technology agnostic, whether it's ultrafiltration or it's atmospheric or it's reverse osmosis, whatever works for the situation we're in. Technology agnostic, but get the cost of the machinery down. When we first built a machine, we had to get a plumber had to come and a welder had to come and they had to come from a city and it cost us 15 days and somebody built a frame and somebody built this and our thing was, why do you need all of that? Why can't I just dump this off a truck, install it in 10 minutes, take it away if I need to, and build a machine designed for community filtration? And we were able to reduce the cost of machinery by 75 or 80%. And then the next idea was, how do you distribute this water effectively in a place where you're power starved, you're safety starved, you're process starved? So we invented something called a water ATM, something that was solar powered at the end of a street. You could be able to trust the water coming out of it. We could manage it digitally from afar, and I could tell you how much water was being filtered. I could give people incentives. So if you send your kid to school, for example, and the kid shows up in school, I can give the parents 20 liters of water for free at their home by giving them a smart card. So our innovations, and we believe there's a whole lot of upside in entrepreneurship. We've deployed the ATMs in 500 different places. They're in Delhi, they're in Bhubaneswar. We have rural franchisees, so entrepreneurs who run our businesses they make more money if their village drinks more clean water. So the idea that entrepreneurship can be tied to this was also something we started with, which was we gave the franchisee a machine, we gave them a brand, we gave them a process, and we asked them to go to their neighbors, their uncles, their aunts, their friends, and say, please drink clean water. For every liter of water that they sold, they did better. And that was sort of an intentional idea of creating local champions that could also build businesses around it. So Sarvajal as a model is community franchising, where independent entrepreneurs run them. Distribution technology, which is water ATMs, for example. Smart cards and payments in the form of being able to take a digital transaction, and creative ideas around that. And so far we're in about 1,000 places in India. We have 500,000 customers a day, a couple of million liters a day that are sold. And we're continuing to try to spend our energy on developing technologies that make that cheaper and faster.
Our last panelist is Bars Tejong. I spelled correct? Not good enough. Welcome. He is the CEO of SI Technology International BV. Please share with our audience the unique innovations you have developed with SI Technology.
Yeah. Well, coming from the Netherlands, our approach to water is actually slightly different than what I hear from the other panelists, in a way that we almost have too much water instead of too little. We are 2/3 below sea level, so if we hadn't specialized in building dams and dikes, etc., then the Netherlands would probably be a bit smaller than it is now. But having said that, our technology, SI Technologies, SI stands for the chemical element silicon. And silicon is widely known and acknowledged to have a beneficial effect on a plant's resilience against stress, biotic and abiotic stress. and especially so on water stress, be it flooding or be it drought. Silicon in a plant helps a plant to optimize the water usage. So our technology is slightly different from what I heard from the other panelists. It's not so much a hardware solution, it's more a software solution, if you want to call it like that. And we enter this problem from the food angle instead of the water angle. So we make sure that with the same amount of water, you grow 25, 30, 35% more food per hectare, or with a lower amount of water, dry spells, which happen all over the world, especially Asia and Africa, you're still able to save your crop and produce the food you need for your family, community, and for yourself. So our approach towards a target group, focus group, is smallholder farmers in Africa and Asia. We produce the product in India, in the vicinity of Mumbai. We have distributors in place that are already selling our product. It's a new technology, so you have to persuade the, on average, conservative farmer that he has to add something new in his daily operations. That's the stage we're in. We've been live in India since 2016 when the product was registered. Since then, as far as our calculations match, saved some 23 to 25 million liters of water using our technology at smallholder farmers.
Before I move to another question, I would like to share with you what our company, WaterGen, is doing. WaterGen is the company that created the revolutionary technology to make water from the air. The technology that we have is very cost effective. It takes around 250 watts in order to create 1 liter of the safe, clean drinking water. And we have different devices that can provide the water from 25 liters to 6,000 liters. And we can make the full-scale, large solution for the villages, for the cities, for the country. And this is what we are focusing now with different governments in the key countries in the world in order to provide the clean drinking water solution that is doesn't require any infrastructure. It is immediate solution. It is plug and drink. You put the device connected to any kind of electricity, and you can have the clean, safe drinking water. Actually, last month we made the pilot with New Delhi municipality and put there the machine that provided water for free for 2,000 people daily. And the people love the water. The taste is great. And actually, we take the water from the air, clean the air. It's very simple. After, chill the water from the air with our special technology, add the minerals, and you have clean and safe drinking water. So this is what we are doing, and for sure we would like to share our technology with people of India. So I would like to have some questions from the panelists. So as we heard in the introduction, we are all talking the topic of scarcity of individual waste. Let's begin with discussion of water sources. How has the depletion and contamination of water resources, including the deterioration of water infrastructure, affected the ability of accessibility of the drinking water? So I think we would start from you.
I think that's a very fundamental question for us to address in India. As I mentioned, groundwater management is a major challenge. And one of the policy issues related to that is the subsidy provided to electricity. So we have that problem in a few states where, because of either free electricity or almost free electricity, there is no incentive for the farmer in particular. So in many of these states, typically in states of Punjab, Haryana, Western UP, there water is mined. There's no incentive. So we need to bring about effective groundwater legislation. There is a national framework legislation, but as you know, in India, both water and sanitation are state subjects. So they are legislated upon by the states. We are a federal system. So again, that issue needs to be addressed fundamentally, so that there is a disincentive to farmers, or this different pricing for electricity. It's been done in many states, including Gujarat, but some of these states don't have that. So that's one policy issue. The other is, we also need, in terms of a more efficient and more effective water conservation. And that needs to be, we need to introduce, from your country, for example, and I was telling Max, I visited Israel 4-5 months ago. Lots of lessons. 2 key lessons as far as water conservation is concerned is, water is owned by the government, basically, right? It's not privately owned, and it's priced. It's quite basic. And in many ways, when I was working in the World Bank and working on China, I wrote a paper called Willingness to Pay. I think people are willing to pay, right? People are paying for water, whether it's avoided health costs or standing in long queues or walking 2 hours for water. But sometimes there's unwillingness to charge. And that's an issue we need to address. I think that, so we don't want to be pushed to the corner to take a decision on that, and I think that awareness is spreading. So that's, the pricing of water is critical. And I think that's, when I read the story of Israel, let there be water, that these were 2 things which I learned from that. But increasingly we need to move to that paradigm. So that's the second point. Water conservation measures from below. Farming practices. Water intensive crop, rice, wheat, sugar cane. What's the incentive for farmers to shift away from those crops? And in the end, it's about changing behavior. So someone said, what's the difference between the water and sanitation sector? And how do you change behavior? How do you incentivize, motivate farmers in particular to move to more water efficiency and crops? And that's a challenge for us. We're learning a lot from sanitation. And in government, we are certainly not experts in changing behavior. That's got to come from the private sector. I mean, you guys are doing it for a living. So if we are moving towards business models which are profitable, but in the end, we did a partnership once on hand washing with soap. Now this act alone saves the lives of almost 2 million kids a year. Now soap companies want to sell soap for a profit. We are interested in the government in the public health impact. So I think there's a partnership here. And in government, we need to do the classic, provide that enabling environment, but have regulation. We also don't have regulation in India. So if you're a private entrepreneur coming in and you are entering into an MOU or an arrangement with the municipality or the Gram Panchayat, can you enforce the pricing mechanism? Can you collect, etc.? And I think that's where we are now moving towards.
You're absolutely right, because one of the first laws when the state of Israel was established is the water belongs to the state, not to the people. You cannot go to take the water from the ground. You even cannot collect the water from the rains. It's illegal, because the water, it seems to be a joke, but it is a reality, and because the state of Israel didn't have water at all in order to survive. And it was a plenty of measures that starting in the entire country when it was established in order to save each gram of water, because the people need to know they need to save the water, because the water is limited. We don't have any more water. And this is very important it's not only in India, it's also in the United States the same. It's not only in India, it's very important to pass the law that the water belongs to the government, that the people will use the water in the right way and not waste it.
Yeah, and just another point on this. So water conservation has got to become a practice. It involves behavior change. And in fact, next week we're getting some experts from your country who are going to help us design a national water conservation campaign, where from kids upwards, and behavior in terms of water is a scarce resource. How do we conserve it? And so that's one of the things which my ministry is going to be launching in the coming months.
Anybody would like to comment?
On water contamination? Yeah. See, we run about 70 plants in Delhi right now, and this is with the local government agency, which is called the Delhi Jal Board. Now, the nature of the contract was such that you had to extract the groundwater and purify it and provide it to the people in the community. And generally what you do, we have a very elaborate process of identifying a site. It's called DASH. It looks at feasibility from a need, potential, technicality. And when you do a technicality analysis, you look at what is the water chemistry. The water chemistry till about 100, 150 feet in Delhi is okay. It's about, total dissolved solids are about 300 to 500, in some cases 800. The moment you hit 350 or 400, it's saline water. Now, it was a revelation for me. I'm from North India. I never knew that Delhi is sitting on a bedrock of seawater, and before too long, when people extract all the surface or subsurface water, they're going to be hitting seawater. All we'll need is desalination plants all over the capital. So that was a revelation for me personally, and I was trying to explain and understand what is the viewpoint that the Delhi Jal Board has. Obviously, they want to ferry water from Yamuna or from other sources, but it's a real issue. I go to the suburbs of Hyderabad city and I see, because the staple diet is rice, everybody's cultivating rice, even though this is an arid area relatively, right? So you are pumping billions of gallons of water for this. So in my ideal world, let Andhra Pradesh cultivate rice because it's sitting on so much water. Let Telangana cultivate pomegranate because that's the staple food, and let them barter, right? So that's the ideal world, but that's not how the world works. So I don't know how that could become part and parcel of the overall process of living within your means. But I think that's very critical. Otherwise, nature has a very, very dramatic way of enforcing its will on the lives of the people.
And then I have a question to you. How does your technology purify the water to safely eliminate all the traces of arsenic and other contamination that you have in the country?
So our technology isn't about filtration. Right, so that's not something we've invented. Other people invented. I would use the technology you suggested if it met the right cost parameters. Right? Our innovations have been in distribution, because equally it's not good enough to put infrastructure down. That infrastructure needs to be maintained, as our friend on the panel said, needs to be maintained and operated. And I think there's just as much innovation required there to lead to behavioral change. I think the Secretary is 1,000,000% correct that in water usage in agriculture, which is 83 or 84% of Indian water use, as you were suggesting earlier, Bart, someone had given me a statistic that in India we're a largely flood irrigated farming capability. That means you dig trenches and let the water move. And apparently if you laser level the land, you can actually reduce flood irrigation by 50% just by drawing the lines by which water moves around the ground. And so there's really significant behavioral issues. The answer to your question is, unfortunately, the antibiotic in India that's gotten ubiquitously cheap is reverse osmosis. And it's energy intensive, it's wastage heavy. Right? 30% of Delhi households have reverse osmosis plants. And the smaller the plant, the worse the wastage. Right? So, it's not a technology to use. And until there's value on water, there's not going to be enough innovation on figuring out what technologies are more appropriate for being able to deploy that. And my view of it is, the cheaper and faster we get to technologies that are appropriate for arsenic, whether that's resin-based or it's something else, the better, or it's atmospheric, the better. But that's not the issue that we were working on.
By the way, I fully agree with your approach that we should separate between water for the shower and water for drink.
Or washing the car, or
washing the car, or whatever. We should totally separate it, because this is in the common sense in the people that the tap water is for everything, but it is not, because we have limited resource of the water, and it's right approach, the same approach that we think that should be done. You have the tap water to do the rest, and you have one water, a different approach to drink, because you don't have too much drinking water, and it's pity to put this water to the garbage. You want to comment?
Arsenic is when it's in water. I'm not a techie again, but this is what I've heard, so I'll just mimic whatever I've heard. So arsenic is the trivalent arsenic is what causes the harm, and if you convert it to pentavalent, then you need to extract it. But the property of the pentavalent arsenic is that it's a good bonding agent. So I think extracting arsenic is not an issue. The issue is how do you dispose it off, because it's poison. So there are various ways which people have thought of doing it. One of the ways, because if it's good bonding agent, you can actually make these concrete blocks and put it in a flyover in the road, and it'll lie there for posterity. So I think the disposal of arsenic is a big issue. But coming back to the first point, I think the bigger issue always is how do you manage the operations of the plant and ensure it is sustainable. And sustainability is not only financial; it's technological, institutional. It's also environmental. So all aspects of sustainability are very critical. So just case in point, if you have 30% water which is getting rejected in the RO process now, rather than shunning the technology, what you would rather do is ensure that you treat it to the drinking water standards and then put it back in the aquifer and ensure that you are water neutral, or you are water at zero liquid discharge. So I guess these are the choices you make, but at the end of the day, in my mind, what rules the roost is the ability to manage and run the plant profitably for the concession term. That, to my mind, is the biggest skill.
Thank you very much. So I have a question to all entrepreneurs, and we will start from you. Sometimes it's hard to convey the message of necessity of shortage to the public and to push governments or municipalities to move, to solve the problems in order to put the new technology. How you face these obstacles and what keeps you going moving forward?
Yeah, it is a big challenge, and I think water, and especially from the world I come from, agriculture, is a multi-level, multi-entry problem, whereby you have to deal on a daily basis with a target group that is very much involved in what nature gives them, brings them, does to them. And if a season is lost, then there will be a next season, and hopefully it's better. If they don't have enough water and they own the land, they just drill a borehole, actually using water that belongs to the community, the state, if you want, use that up and then drill a new one. So there is not a long-term view on how to use the water and how to make sure that you have a sustainable water supply. And in agriculture, the flooding example you gave is one, but there is agricultural possibilities in doing it within a confined area, which your company is also involved in. There is a big company in the Netherlands, for instance, and I don't think it is for every farmer. Also from a cost angle, it's realizable, but you can grow your vegetables and your fruits and all kind of crops within a confined area using 95% less water than you would use in the open field. And you can produce a constant quality, you can do it faster, etc., etc. There's also a possibility to farm actually on the water with a floating farm, where you have a water supply that you have to sometimes desalinate, but you can use the water. So there are zillions of possibilities, and I think all the possibilities to solve the water problem have already been invented, or at least are on the drawing boards, but it's just a matter to convey the message and to get your target group actually accepting it and perhaps also investing in it. And what you correctly mentioned, charging for water usage, that's the real challenge, I think, and there municipalities and governments have to take their role as owners of the water and get the message across.
On the regulation, that water is a state subject is a boon as well as a bane. Why do I say that? It's a boon because if it's not a federal government structure or a federal government ownership, your ability to execute concession terms is fairly fast and quick because you are dealing with the lowest common denominator, and the cycle time for that is very quick. It's a bane because you have to replicate it 4,000 times before you start to make an impact, right? So I've always debated in my mind, is it good that the ownership of the water rights and the control or the regulation is at the lowest common denominator or not? I mean, there are arguments on both sides. What has worked for us specifically is that we have a reduced cycle time, so we're able to execute the concession terms very fast because it doesn't need to go through an arduous cycle. But then, yes, you need to have on-ground teams that keep on chugging along to sign these contracts. So from a regulatory standpoint, which is the biggest difference on water in India specifically, those are my views. Insofar as the regulation of water is concerned, there are two bodies in India. There is the packaged water industry, which looks at Bureau of Indian Standards 14543, which is this water. They see whether retailing is allowed or disallowed. And then there is food and safety regulation, which ensure that the water which is edible conforms to certain criteria. The problem is that this water is the only water that FSSAI recognizes as food because it's retailed, but there are other germinating industries that are there in the country. And to legitimize this, it's very important that the regulation under food and safety looks at that and creates regulation so that spurious players do not have a home run by mimicking some of the larger players. And that's something we are working with the FSSAI. Hopefully, in the next parliament session, this may be tabled as a bill.
I think regulations are a complicated topic because water is politically Oh, you can't just start charging people for water in India and expect that to work without committing suicide at some level. But I do think there's a lot of room in between regulation where the private sector and innovation can help dramatically. And the argument that I'd like to make is that at some level, water is this really weird thing, because if you have a lot of it and it's free, it's worth nothing to you. Right? If you have none of it, you'll pay everything you have for some. Right? And so it has this wildly variable view. If I'm walking across the desert and I need a liter of water, I give you everything I own and sign away my house just so I can survive until tomorrow. And so the argument that there is stuff to be done, whether that is in behavior change or new practices or finding value in the derivatives of water. So for example, better agriculture with better outputs with less water. It may not have to be about water, but it could be about greater agricultural output that might be a reason that you're able to address some of these issues. And to me, that's an innovation opportunity for entrepreneurs. I think that, as many of you might note, and I mean this with no offense to anybody, but water as an industry is a very boring, slow place, right? There aren't lots of people that are graduating from college and saying, I want to go solve the water problem, right? They want to do all kinds of other things. And that makes it also a very unique opportunity because it's a daily need. It's something people are paying for, whether in money or not. Right? It's something governments worry about, not just domestically, but even with strategic issues with their neighbors, with rivers, with all kinds of problems. Right? It is something that everybody recognizes and values. There's bottles sitting in front of us. This industry didn't exist in 1991. Right? Just as a weird topic, New York City, who has the safest water in their pipes in the world, right? Sells 4 billion plastic bottles of water a year, which they sold 0 in 1990. That's also 200,000 18-wheel trucks delivering water to people, sometimes as far away from Fiji, which makes 0 sense. Right? Again, those are ripe opportunities, in my view, for innovation from entrepreneurs to find answers. And my sense is that this requires a bit of a push to get there, and we should see how to make that happen.
New York, the best quality of water, so I can tell you that in the recent months, it was a lot of publications in the United States regarding the contaminated water in New York schools. So it's
the pipes?
Pipes.
The pipe,
No, but it is water. The water is coming through the pipes. So 80% of the schools in New York has problem of the clean drinking water. The kids are drinking very bad water. By the way, I heard a very interesting story how they find in Flint, Michigan, that they had the lead in the water. Do you know the story? It's very interesting because they put attention that in the very big area of people, in the Flint, Michigan area, it's around 50,000 families living, the kids had the problems with the scores in the school, and they didn't understand why. So in the rest of there, everything was okay, and in this area it was a problem, and they started to research why it is happening, and at the end they made some, by coincidence, some tests for one of the kids in the school that was sick, and they found a lot of lead, and nobody didn't understood how it came to him, and after they're starting to check from where it's coming. And lead is not only coming through the drinking water. When you're going to make a shaving, the lead is coming to your body, so it's poison. So
right. I don't want to take this as an aside, but the issue is there's an entrepreneurial opportunity. So when I left Servagil, one of the things we started working on was reinventing the water fountain, right? And the reason for that is because the trust problem wasn't with the water. The trust problem was with the pipes, right? So if at the end of dispensing, you were able to negate the pipe problem, that got interesting, right? A public water point, for example, in New York City, people don't drink out of them because dogs drink out of them. They don't trust the pipes. There are issues. They did in 1990. They don't anymore. So think about redesigning the water fountain and make it something that people believe is safe, right? And the water's actually clean. It's the pipes. Flint was a very different problem. They messed that up royally. But that.
Let me just give you a sort of government perspective. I completely agree. And your question was, how do you address the challenge of dealing with governments? And I think there's a political imperative today for the state to deliver clean water. It's good politics. So, for example, just last week I had a 2-hour meeting with the Chief Minister of Rajasthan, Rajasthan, in all everyone knows, is the most water scarce state in India. And they've got all kinds of plans all the way from water conservation up to down, including desalination. Can they get to 50 cents a cubic meter like you do in Israel on desal, etc. And look at the state you are in today. So Telangana, here the chief minister decided as soon as he won the election in 2014 that he was going to provide a tap water in every household. Now you can argue about the cost of this scheme. It's 45,000 crores. What is that? $7 billion. It's a huge program called Mission Bhagiratha. But obviously it's good politics. The example I give is my own case. So in the state of UP, where I was working 20 years ago, this was the first project in India called Swajal. Sounds a little bit like yours, which means our water in Hindi. And we were decided that we would have community managed systems, but also community cost sharing. So in the cabinet, I was presenting this. My secretary threw me in at the deep end and said, you go and present, I'm not going to present to the cabinet. So the chief minister was a woman called Mayawati. And all her 14 members of the cabinet were men. So when I presented this and said, we want 10% capital cost sharing and full O&M financing, so that's the key thing, and community systems, simple gravity systems, mainly in the hills. She went around the table. Usually she didn't consult anyone, she would just decide. But she said, what do you guys think? And all of them said, there's no way we can charge anything for water. We can't. So it came to her in the end, and then of course in Hindi she said, listen, in villages, men are spending a lot of money on gambling and liquor. And 10% of the capital cost of small systems is nothing. Plus it's going to benefit the women. And she said, approve. So it took Mayawati, the female chief minister, to understand how women are spending 3-4 hours a day in collecting water. So, I think that state governments are increasingly understanding, recognizing that they will need to deliver safe water, or at least create the enabling environment for entrepreneurs such as yourselves to come in. So I think it's getting better, but we're still a way away from it.
But how you encourage the new entrepreneurs to go, especially to the water industry? Yeah,
so I think that, the kinds of stories I'm hearing here, for me, are typically more municipal urban stories. You're talking of Delhi Jal Board, etc. Although I'm hearing also that you've got rural franchisees. So today in India, if you look at household connections in rural areas, only 16% of rural households have taps in their houses. Pipe water supply is about 55%, but that's what we call public stand posts. So there's one stand post in a village, and people go there and fill up their buckets. And if you look at a combination of pipe water supply, hand pumps and dug wells, our figures tell us that about 80% of people have at least 40 liters per capita per day. And that's drinking, but also washing and cooking. So there is a clear need for better services and more water. I find the idea of separating drinking from non-drinking interesting. The challenge for me is how do you actually implement that? So it's difficult to practically implement. You can put, you don't need infrastructure. You can put one of your devices and say you're getting water from the air and it's cheap. Yep. But it's again behavior. How do you get people to say, I'm going to use only so much for water and so much for bathing and cooking? Again, it's a behavioral challenge which we need to address.
Yeah, it's certainly behavior, and I think the decentralized system for the water drinking and for the rest is a solution, because you don't have too much water to make it in the standard of drinking water.
And again, decentralized management of water as a whole is critical. So for us in India, the old, I come from a generation where we talk of the Dublin-Rio principles, where it says water is both a social and an economic good, and it's best managed at the lowest appropriate level. So there's an interesting model in Gujarat, for example, where bulk water supply is supplied right up to the village, and the in-village distribution is managed by the local body, the Gram Panchayat. And they are responsible for operation and maintenance. So they've got to raise the funds, either they use their grants or they charge people, but they're accountable. And so I think that's important.
We are a small state, but according to our experience, it's better to centralize the system in all the country of the water. Because it's not possible that in one state they have more water and in another state they have less water.
We have that all the time. In our country, that's the perennial problem.
You need to think how you can centralize the water system in the country, because the water, this is the basic. Absolutely. Without water, we cannot live. So I would like to speak about another question. So in past years, few months, we have seen earthquakes in Mexico, in Italy, hurricanes in the United States, in Asia. So what role does emergency play in availability of your products? And how emergency disasters made a difference in your approach?
So that's a very interesting question. About 5 years ago, this was the same question that was asked by our board. And we created this product called ATOM. It's called Autonomous Transportable Operating Module. So what it is a 20-foot container. You have the regular 5 or 6 stage purification system, auxiliary power, DG set, and also solar power. And it is battle ready, so to speak. You can pick it up on a short notice, ferry it on a flatbed truck to wherever you need to. And it has the ability to purify from seawater to flood water to sewage water. You need to make, because it's all modular, so you pick and choose the module depending on what kind of calamity are you looking at. However, this product was developed based on this philanthropic way of fixing the problem. When you go out and try to sell this model, because eventually you have to, if you want to be battle ready, you need to have on a map of India about 8 or 10 such hubs which can mobilize these resources on a 30-minute notice and can move very fast to those disaster-prone areas, right? So one has to invest in these rather than digging the borewell when there is fire, right? So my sense or my wisdom demanded or dictated that once you go and try to sell this to government agencies, the state governments, or even corporates, for example, for the philanthropic objective, there would be takers who will say, nobody whom I met with said this is a bad idea, but nobody was willing to sign a check and finance it. So it's kind of so that product is lying there. In fact, it's put very close to Hyderabad airport, a place called Shadnagar, where it is purifying very dirty water with very high TDS, very saline water. So it's kept there as a benchmark. So I have mixed views on this. The country needs it, but then you have to put serious effort, resources behind it. Otherwise, it will only be lip service. Whenever there's flood, everybody, the whole nation gets together, right? Let's fix something and let you have money pouring and resources pouring in. If only that is done when the calamity is not happening, it will be all the more better prepared.
So sorry, have you contacted the NDMA? You've met Ravi Jain.
Yeah.
What do they say? Yeah, let's talk about it. I mean, he's a batchmate and good friend, and he's just been extended by 1 year starting tomorrow. So maybe we can do something there.
So anyway, those are my views. I'm sure the other panelists may have.
We have created, by the way, very interesting solution with our machines. That we send our machines now to United States when they have the hurricanes in Texas and Miami. So it's the self-operating machine in the track that connected to the generator, that not depends on anything, that distributes a lot of water, and we distribute a lot of water to the people. And we have purification unit, the one of its kind, that working on the charge batteries, that the weight is 12 kilogram, that you can put on your back, and it makes purification of on one battery 240 liters of the water. It's not making desalination because you need a lot of energy. But if you have the regular water, even poison water, we did it for the Israeli army when they go to our lovely neighbors and they would like to poison the water in order to poison the soldiers. So they put from the one hand this kind of device. It's taking the bad water, and from the another kind you have, from another way you have the good water that the soldiers can drink. And it was very interesting for the countries to see that such technology that is made on the portable batteries that you can charge is existing, and you don't need to carry tracks. Let's go to another question. We have many investors, I hope, in the audience today. Why is the water technology an attractive investment, and why do you see a major growth areas for innovation in water, and what water technologies excite you right now? Let's start here.
It's a good question. Again, my focus has been on distribution. So for me, it's there are a couple of things that I think matter. one, the business model of being able to service and generate behavioral change to me is where the biggest task is, right? Whether that's agricultural use, it's industrial use, it's drinking water use. Those are patient life cycles. And unfortunately, I find the investment community doesn't have that kind of patience for this kind of a service business, because there are other service businesses that are faster. Even, it's true in energy as well. There aren't a whole lot of people going into the discom business. A lot of people going into the supply and generation business. There's a lot of that happening in water as well. So given that it's a utility and it's a utility innovation, I'd like to see a lot more of willingness to put money into something where there's a long life cycle.
There are three business models running in the water business today. The first business model is where you're an equipment salesperson and you create a lot of equipment, you give it for AMC and you do all that good stuff. The second model is where you are like the Suez or that French company, Veolia of the world, where you take a PPP contract, you get partially paid by the government and all that good stuff, right? The third model is where you actually sell water, but not necessarily under the aegis of a PPP, right? Like a packaged water players and all the people who are in that business. Now, all these three models have different profitabilities and different payback cycles. The packaged water business obviously being at the top because it's like an FMCG market, so its price to equity multiple is fairly high, that of a Hindustan Lever or a Nestle, right? So very attractive. A lot of people get into that because it's FMCG less water. The first model is very boring, as somebody just said, because it's growing at some abysmal rate and nobody wants to pay too much money for water. And the AMC is all the more difficult because a plumber does as good a job as anybody else does, and that's why they're eating into that market share, at least in India and other developing countries. The second model is where you need very deep pockets and a significant risk appetite. And in my experience, there are very limited opportunities to finance that. In fact, there is only one stock market in Toronto which kind of looks at this business very favorably, and there is not too much money in that business. And then there are people on the periphery like us who don't belong to any of the models but who are trying to mix and match some of these models. So raising fund is a challenge, and therefore what you try to do is you try to buttress your lack of financial viability by adding two more bottom lines: the social bottom line and the environmental bottom line. So even if you are in mid-teens as far as the IRR of the project is concerned, you make it up through other paybacks.
Well, I think one of the challenges and also perceptions that you have over the past couple of years is that money is deployed to, again, from an agricultural perspective, technologies that require less water to produce a kilo of whatever. We as I Technologies are part of the Secure Water for Food program, sponsored by USAID from the US, Sweden, the Netherlands and South Africa. Over the past 4 years, 40 startups, innovators, coming from a water perspective, were awarded funds to scale up their innovation. Unfortunately, the new administration cut this program off, but perhaps it's going to be revived in the future. But there are a lot of innovations that have to do with less water demand in agriculture, and the majority of them focus on the obvious, vegetables, fruits, instead of protein from livestock, for instance, which is one of the least efficient protein providers that we can think of. You first grow the protein on the land, then you put it in an animal, you slaughter the animal, and then you get the protein to yourself. I mean, that's no use. Still, we see, especially in developing countries, that the people's diets, as soon as they get a bit more money available, shift from vegetarian to non-vegetarian diets, and that there is a development that we need to stop there. And I think the majority of the innovations under this Secure Water for Food program, we're focusing on that, change behavior, which is by definition a very slow process, but you need to start somewhere, and if money is available for those initiatives, you better deploy it now.
And last question that I have for everybody, what impact do you think today technologies will have in 20 years ahead? And where do you see the water industry, and what do you think will be the world water availability and accessibility numbers will convey?
Sure. Look, not just by going by what I've heard today, I think technology is going to drive this. But again, it's not just technology, it's about institutions, it's about financing. And so if you ask me, from what I've heard today and from what I've seen around me, I think that there is huge scope, not just for technology, but for private entrepreneurship. And particularly in India, and I'm talking of rural India, where I think there's a huge business opportunity, there's a big market. And today, the state has a monopoly over water supply. But I think that increasingly, looking at the cost benefit, and if the business model can work and we can provide water cheaper and better quality, I think that the state and politics will dictate that we move in that direction. And in terms of technology, your own company which is producing water out of air, and if that can be done at scale, and it can be done and it can be managed and it can be maintained, I think that's going to drive the way the business will move. I mean, 20 years ago we didn't have cell phones. Now we can't live without looking at them every second of the day. And I suspect that with the pace at which technology is sort of coming up all over the place, I think that's going to be the exciting future. In my sector, in water, I see that happening.
I think the technology is coming, and many people see it as we look for more and more industries that are disruptible through private innovation. You know, there are two arguments I'd make. I think there's technology that's about the operational design of delivering water solutions that is also a big opportunity. And secondly, I think there's an interesting set of policy innovations that are beginning to emerge. I don't have answers to this, so I'm just going to give an example. New Zealand has been playing with pay-for-success models of PPPs, where they're giving a road contract where the road developer gets paid their profit by reducing the number of accidents on the road. So now suddenly the road contractor is responsible for painting lines and ensuring their safety and there's no potholes and these sorts of pieces. And I think increasingly that could be an interesting way for policy in a market like India, right? Or developing markets, to be able to pay for innovation only if the innovation is delivered, right? Because it counters other costs.
Sort of outcome-based innovation.
Outcome-based PPPs.
Yeah.
But so I think we're going to see all kinds of movement in that direction for a simple reason, that water is going to become more and more of a problem for everybody everywhere in the world over the next 20 years, except for maybe the Netherlands.
On two sides, on the use of water, I think humanity has this ability to pull itself back before disaster strikes, and I think it'll be no different in water. And I think that the price of water is abysmal. If Singapore can charge $4.50 for a meter cube and Germany can charge $6 for a meter cube of water, in India it's a rounding error. It doesn't even seem to make an impact when India is going to be water stressed. So I think sanity will prevail in regulation. I think it will drive the pricing of water and driving a certain construct that will ensure that water companies don't lose money and keep going back with a begging bowl to other entities for their sustainability. I think they're going to be sustainable. On the technology side, I'm not so optimistic, or let me rephrase that. I'm not very buoyant about water technology doing what telecom has done. Telecom is cutting edge. I mean, I saw from 1G to 4G while I was in telecom, so I think it works very fast. Water may not work so fast, but it doesn't need to, because the key is not so much about the water purification processes. The key is what sits on top of that. So I believe a lot of innovation will happen in making water available at a very cheap price through better distribution models and better control. And that, to my mind, will be key, including the UI for the consumers.
If we realize that water is a public commodity, I think states, as the owner of this commodity, should also lead by example. And we've seen that in the Netherlands and in Western Europe on other products and services, whereby the government said, listen, market parties, we're not going to procure your product or your service anymore unless it is, and then a definition follows, up to our standards. And as they are a larger consumers of all the services and all the products within a country, they can set a target, they can set a definition. They lead by example, and they make sure that developments that are then picked up by market parties also spread to other market parties. And that's what Western Europe, as far as water is concerned, did successfully in pricing for water. And that should be available, those models should be available all over the world.
Thank you.
So I would like to summarize in a couple of words that clean water technology, as you know, is a game changer and will improve the lives of billions and save lives of millions around the world. And we face many challenges today. Climate is changing, water scarcity, population growth, place tremendous pressure on the world limited water supply system. As you told, we have only 1% from the water that we use. That's all, nothing else. The rest is non-usable. It's estimated that 2/3 of the world will have the lack of the drinking water by 2025. It's not going to happen in 200 years. It's going to happen in our life, in more less than 10 years. Did you know that 443 million schools days are lost each year due to the water-related diseases? We can do better and we must do better. Access to clean drinking water helps families release women and children from the daily burden of water collection and allows them to free up their time and to get the education and seek employment. And the health benefits are immeasurable and will lessen malnutrition, spread of diseases, and healthcare costs. Clean water is not only a humanitarian effort, but a prudent business decision. A healthy population whose primary needs are met with clean drinking water leads to a prosperous economy. When you take a close look to UN Sustainable Development Goals, clean drinking water directly affects 11 of 70 desired solutions to improve our world. As we all clearly understand today, the world cannot wait until 2030, because this is the UN Sustainability Goals, in order to achieve it. And we need to do it now. We need to find the solutions from day to day in order to help to the world. The time is human lives, ladies and gentlemen. And honored guests, let's act together and fast in order to save people's lives and to help the people. This is the first priority in the world, is to bring to the people the clean access of clean drinking water. Thank you very much for all panelists. Thank you very much, the Secretary, for participating.